welcome to the Numbers of Thoth, the place where we decode the gods of ancient Egypt, its myths and mysteries. I'm your host, Julia Herdman, your guide through the sands of time. Today, we're entering the blazing aurora of the goddess Sekhmet. She's a goddess who embodied divine rage, cosmic justice, and raw solar power. But she was also a god of healing and of cosmic balance. And trust me, she's not your average lioness. When we think about Sekhmet, we imagine a goddess so powerful that even the sun god Re had to trick her to stop her killing the whole of humanity. She was a goddess with a breath that was like arrows of flame. She was a protector and punisher and a destroyer, but she was also a healer and a great mother. This is the goddess Sekhmet, also known as the Eye of Re. Her name literally means the powerful one, and she's always depicted as a lion-headed woman wearing a solar disc and a uraeus, that's a royal diadem with a cobra. And with her fiery breath, she burns Re's enemies into ashes, and with her sharp claws she defends him. And yet she was also worshipped as a wonderful mother, as a healer and protector, particularly against the ravages of one of the ancient world's greatest tragedies, that is, plague. Yes, she was a paradox. She was full of fury, but she could also be on your side and turn that power that she had into a protective shield. This makes Sekhmet one of the most compelling figures in ancient Egyptian mythology. So at the beginning I talked about her spree, her killing spree, where she tried to kill the whole of mankind with this terrible breath of hers. She didn't sort of do it of her own volition. Her father, Re, rather instructed her to do it because he'd rather fallen out with humanity and he thought it was time to pay them a lesson. This story appears in the New Kingdom Book of the Heavenly Cow. And the story goes like this. Humanity rebels against Re, and the sun god is furious and sends his eye, that is, the goddess Sekhmet, down to earth to punish them. And she comes in the form of a beast, a wild, raging lioness, and she stalks the land like wildfire, and the slaughter is enormous. And at the end of the first day of her rampage, half of humanity are dead or dying. And Re looks down at her and thinks, what have I done? And he says, I've got to stop this. But look at her. She's just wild. She's on the rampage. There's nothing I can do. She's just got to go and finish the job. So, with some advice from the rest of the Council of Gods, gods like Thoth, they come up with a cunning plan. They know that she likes two things above all else: blood, the taste of blood, and the taste of beer. And so the cunning plan they come up with is to dye a lake of beer red. And then Sekhmet comes upon this beautiful red lake of frothy gorgeous smelling beer, and she thinks, oh, heaven, and starts to drink it. And as she drinks it, she becomes drowsier and drowsier, and finally she's so drunk she falls asleep. Ray breathes a huge sigh of relief. And when she wakes up, she's forgotten all about the fact that she was on this maniacal killing spree, and becomes her usual self. Egyptologists explain this myth by saying that it's because she has this dual nature. Egyptologists love talking about things having a dual nature, and in fact, it's true. Most things in Egypt, and you have to say in the world even today, people have a good side and a bad side, and this is definitely true of the gods. But the thing about Sekhmet, the relationship between Sekhmet and Re, is that Re can't do any wrong. Re is the benign, static, or non-changing sun god who is always there, who is always good. So Re is not the evil sun. It's not the sun that bakes the earth and kills things. So in the Egyptian mind, that the other gods step in and take on that role, that destructive, chaotic role of the sun, which is obviously, a really big part of ancient Egyptian life, because they are surrounded by desert. They know exactly what an excess of sun can do to people and plants and animals. But they do not attribute this to Re. They attribute it to his eye, his daughter, always female, and usually it's in the form of the goddess Sekhmet, but it also can be in the form of the goddess Tefnut, and of Mut, and of Hathor. So the Eye of Re is a roaming force, and she appears in other myths too, particularly the myth of the distant goddess. And in this myth, the eye, which is the hot part of the sun, flees south. It's a story that sort of follows the transit of the sun through its apparent overhead movement from the Tropic of Cancer down to the equator. And so the hottest part of the sun moves south from the 21st of June, appears to leave Egypt at that point around the summer solstice, and go south to places like Nubia and Punt, as I said. And of course the Egyptians worry that it won't come back. The roaming eye flees to Nubia, turning into a lioness and threatening to unravel the cosmos through killing everybody and burning up the land. And so the gods of Heliopolis, Re and Thoth, and usually a few others involved, they decide that they must lure her back to Egypt. And they do this with, amongst other things, beer, which we know that she loves, but also with music and wine and mirrors. She loves to look at herself and see how beautiful she is. And so they send out a search party and they induce her to come back to Egypt. And when she has returned, which is usually around about the time, which is the time of the summer solstice, we know that the world order is correct and that we are in a state of Mat again. Egyptologists often describe her as the flame of the sun, and that flame is violent, but it's not evil necessarily. It burns away injustice, rebellion, for instance, rebellion amongst the people, and its return resets the cosmic order. Sekhmet statues and her appearance in temples reveal her real power. Sekhmet wasn't just a mythical goddess, she was very real to the ancient Egyptians. Her main temple was at Memphis, where she stood alongside Ptah, the creator god, and Nefertum, their son, and whose name means perfume, beautiful smell. And he's always shown as a lovely lion cub with blue lotuses, perfumed blue lotuses. But it's at Karnak where her imagery truly dominates. There are over 700 black granite statues of Sekhmet, and these were commissioned by the pharaoh Amenhotep III. So why so many? 700. Quite an unusual number. We know that 7 was considered magical by the ancient Egyptians. 7 was also associated with the goddess Isis, who was also a goddess of healing. And 700 probably is about magnifying that quality, that healing quality, that power, the power of Sekhmet, and perhaps Isis as well. And many scholars believe there was a plague during his reign, and that these goddess statues were put there to protect the kingdom, to protect the royal family, and to protect the temple and its priests from this horrendous disease which ravaged the ancient world. Well, in fact, ravaged Europe and the ancient world right up until the 17th century, certainly in Europe, and would still ravage the world today if it weren't for antibiotics. So Sekhmet is a curious mixture of violence and femininity, something that is quite problematic, and she's definitely a challenge to us, particularly to modern people. She's female, as I said, she's violent. She's not particularly nurturing, but she is protecting. We don't see her like Isis, suckling a child on her lap, although she does sit in a very Isis-like pose. But she does not appear as a mother as such. She is really an expression of divine rage, but it's a different sort of rage to the rage that is expressed by gods like Set or Seth and Horus. Because she's female, her fury is often seen as emotional and uncontrollable. And this is often a view that men take of angry women, that the anger is not justified, and that women can't be easily controlled when they get angry. They can't be reined in. They have to be placated. That women's anger is somehow different and more destructive than men's anger because men don't understand it, or don't understand where that anger comes from. But in the case of Sekhmet, we do know where the anger comes from. It comes from Re, actually. It's male anger expressed through a female goddess. So I'm not sure the Egyptologists are entirely right about that. I think what the Egyptians see is that both men and women are capable of emotion and of anger and of rage, and that rage, as with all things, has two sides. One can be a justified rage, a rage that brings the world back to justice, or it can be an unreasonable rage which creates chaos. And in the case of Sekhmet, we see both. And so Sekhmet was no ordinary murderess, if such a thing exists. She was, in fact, the creation and tool of her father, the sun god Re. As the destructive aspect of the sun, she could kill at will. She could kill what was good and what was bad without discrimination. In her negative aspect, she was characterized as whimsical, irrational, and hard to control because she was powerful and female, while in her positive aspect, her power was turned to protection of Re's people, who were always vulnerable to early death from disease and conflict. In this way, Sekhmet was the people's warrior. She was their champion, and they loved her and honoured her in temples and shrines up and down the Nile. Thousands of amulets depicting her, either seated or standing and holding a papyrus-shaped sceptre, were created, as well as hundreds of statues, particularly by Pharaoh Amenhotep III at Karnak. At the end of the 18th dynasty, many of these statues were moved to other temples and redisplayed. Some were even reinscribed with other pharaohs' names, such as Ramesses IV and Sheshonq I. Sekhmet's statues were even redisplayed without being finished or inscribed, as in the Temple of Ptah at Karnak. Indeed, many Sekhmet statues were left uninscribed, unpolished, or without carved details, which suggests that whether finished or unfinished, they were considered to carry the same level of effectiveness. In later antiquity, Sekhmet's figurines were often defaced or destroyed by incoming Christians and Arabs. The severity of these attacks is quite shocking at times, but particularly her head is removed or mutilated, as are her hands. These mutilations are in fact difficult to date, but they most likely occurred when the statues were still seen as magical and thus needed to be neutralized. So, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the goddess Sekhmet, and if you would like to learn more about Sekhmet or any of the other gods of ancient Egypt, together with the sacred numbers associated with them, please join me on Substack or on Patreon. I've given you the details in the information below. So until next time, stay safe and stay curious. And please don't forget to press the like button and subscribe if you found this podcast a little bit useful or interesting. Until then, until next time, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.